Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Straight Talk with Daily Tribune. Today we have our special EDSA Anniversary Edition, and we have one of the key figures, perhaps the main character of that fateful day on February 22, 1986, the former Defense Secretary, former Senate President, the invincible Juan Ponce Enrile. Sir, magandang hapon po.
Magandang hapon sa inyo lahat, Mario.
Sir,
Unang sasabihin ko, itong taon na ito, 2020, is in all respects like the calendar of 1986. In 1986, today is Thursday. It is also February 20. Ngayon Sabado pala. Sabado ngayon, 22.
Yes.
At this hour, in 1986, Saturday, 22 of February,
125.
I was in conference at home with Greg Onasan, Red Kapunan, and now Ambassador Noe Wong, who were members of the RAM, the Reform the Armed Forces movement. And we were discussing where to announce our withdrawal of support from President Marcos. Some of the people with me in my den at that time, at this hour, were suggesting that we will disperse in the provinces and conduct guerrilla warfare against the regime of President Marcos, and I said no. I did not agree. I said if we do that, surely we'll all die because we cannot sustain it. I've been in the guerrillas when I was young, and I know what it was and what it is to engage in guerrilla warfare. We cannot sustain the supply of bullets, the supply of food, the supply of men, and so forth and so on. So I said, let's confront the situation here in Metro Manila, and we must be ready to die. And then we discussed where we are going to
Withdraw support.
announce the withdrawal of support. Some suggested Fort Bonifacio, which at that time was not yet what it is now. And I said, no, that's too big an area to control. We will be subject to fire on all sides. And then some suggested Villamor. We could be hit from Bonifacio with artillery. So I suggested, let's go to my office in Camp Aguinaldo. That's why we now have what is known as EDSA 1, because it happened in EDSA because of that decision that I made. It was not really planned that way, but it just happened that that was the best choice that I thought at the time in order to really confront the situation. By the way, at that time, the planning of RAM, as far as I was concerned, was not against President Marcos. Contrary to the perception of people, we were not really against the president. It just happened that we had to include him, and it became a collateral damage because we had to, he was the commander-in-chief and president. The real opposition namin at that time was a junta that was secretly organized in the country, composed of the chief of staff, then the head of the army, the head of the Air Force, the head of the Navy, and the head of the Coast Guard. And I learned about this junta, its organization and presence, as early as between November and December of 1982, after President Marcos came back from his last visit official visit to the United States, to Washington, D.C. And the one who informed me about it was still alive.
Sino yun, sir?
Si Edna Camcam. Oh.
Who is led Edna Camcam that time, during that time?
Edna Camcam at that time was very close to General Bell. Yeah, and that's what I'm telling you. And why Edna Camcam told me about it, because according to her, her conscience was bothered because nobody knew that the family of Edna Camcam, the mother especially, and her uncles, brothers of the mother, who was a Catholico by surname, was very close to my father, who happened to start his practice of law in the province of Cagayan. And the reason why he had to tell me, because of the plan of the junta, that if President Marcos died for any reason, they will not announce, the junta will not announce the death of President Marcos. Instead, they will call a cabinet meeting in Malacanang, and in the name of President Marcos, and once the members of the cabinet were in Malacanang, they will quarantine all of us. But in my case, they have to assassinate me, because they knew that I will resist. So, because of that, I organized the RAM.
To counter
No,
that.
first, I reorganized my security battalion in the Defense Department, which became the nucleus
Of RAM.
of the Reform the Armed Forces movement.
At that stage, sir, that
That is the
February.
evolution.
At that
This is
February.
1982, end of 1982.
Mm.
I did not know that Marcos was sick during
Okay.
yeah, until August 8th of 1983, when I learned about the sickness of President Marcos.
But the members of the junta already knew that Marcos is sick.
Of course, because that's why they formed the junta, and their plan was to make Mrs. Marcos president for at least 6 months, and then later on remove her and let the country be under military control.
Under General Bell.
That was the plan. Well, I did not question the veracity of that story. I assumed the truth of it. I had no doubt about the credibility of my informant, and that's why secretly I had to protect myself as a matter of survival, not only for myself and for my family. And because of that story, I provided even Cardinal Sin with the security.
So at that stage nung February 1986, nasaan na po yung junta? At yun yung sinasabi niyong
They were in
motivation
control.
niyo to
They were
withdraw
already
support
in control of Malacanang.
at that time.
Yes.
Okay.
President Marcos was at that point
Incapacitated na siya.
a virtual prisoner of Malacanang. General Bell was the chief of staff. He was the head of DISA, Director General. He controlled the Presidential Security Command. His son, Irwin, was his second in command in the Presidential Security Command. The son of General Bell, Rexor, was the head of the close-in security of President Marcos in Malacanang. And then the son of General Bell, Wirlo, was head of the armored unit
So nasa
of
kanila
the
lahat ng
military
resources.
organization. That's why you can ask General Ramos if he's still functioning. In July, no, I'm not saying this facetiously. In July of 1985, I went to President Marcos and tendered my resignation
July
because
85
I
yan,
could no longer
1985.
work with him. And with that government, but he refused. And I was here, President Marcos was here, and Ramos was on my left. When I was talking to President Marcos, we were facing west, towards the Manila Bay, in the music room of Malacanang. And I was giving him my resignation. And I know that the men of General Ver were listening behind the curtain at my back. And I told him, you are no longer in control of the situation. And President Marcos refused to accept my resignation, and what he said was, we started this together, we will finish it together. And indeed, we finished it together.
So yung withdrawal nyo, yung withdrawal of support nyo sa kanya, symbolic lang, yung junta talaga ang nyo, ang you prevented the junta.
We have to start somewhere.
Is the First Lady into it? Kasama si First
I don't
Lady?
know. I don't think so.
Pero dun sa withdrawal of support nyo, sir, kasi kasama ba sa calculation ninyo yung people power, yung susuportahan ng tao?
It was purely a military action. Okay. At that point, when we launched our effort on that Saturday, we had in control. By the way, we printed or we produced 10,000 with serial numbers of those banderitas.
Armband.
Our what do you call this? Countersign. The flag of the Philippines. Until now, I have my own
flag.
Flag, a small flag, at home, attached to the blue denim uniform that I wore during that event.
I can remember the jacket.
Yeah.
So that pure military action,
And our by the way, we never intended to harm the first family, but only to immobilize them, and then of course to ask the president to step down and put the country back into a normal democratic condition.
Yun yung plano nyo.
Yeah.
Yung,
But I think, in a way, we were lucky that we did not go through our plan, and that it exploded prematurely, because when I read the book of Arturo Arruisa, they learned about the plan earlier than that Saturday, and they were prepared to slaughter all of us if we went to Malacanang. Because they learned about it, because somebody, a member of the RAM who was in Malacanang, he was number 2, so Erwin, also a graduate of the Philippine Military Academy, revealed
to Erwin
the RAM. That is for the first time that they learned about it.
So
From 1982 to that, I think it was Wednesday, prior to that Saturday, that this guy revealed it to Irwin, and they started investigating.
Okay.
But President Marcos could not believe that I would be involved.
They presented some soldiers in Malacanang during that day.
And the Malacanang was totally surrounded already
By the junta.
by the military forces that were under the control of the government.
General Vera, okay.
If we went there at that time, we would have been slaughtered.
So,
those are the imponderables.
so
Of,
ang malayo, sa kwento nyo, sir, malayo pa rin yun sa pumapasok kung sino yung mga nagkaroon ng power after that EDSA,
Hindi,
parang
initial
wala
lang
sila.
yun
Wala yung sa equation.
You ask questions, I'll answer.
What was the real plan of the RAM and
Well,
Who will be installed as
naturally, in our planning, although we did not reveal that, we would organize a revolutionary council. I was the one who selected the members. And the revolutionary council that we planned to do were 3 civilians and 2 military men.
Yun yung council.
Now, Cory, myself, and Rafael Salas. The 2 military men were Ramos and General Rafael Ileto.
Okay.
That was supposed to be the governing body for the country in the interim while we are transitioning towards democratic condition. Because we'll have to conduct an election and bring back Congress, because there's no Congress at that time. There was the Batasan, and then restore the presidency. Why Cory? Because at that point there was a snap election that was ongoing. If there was no snap election, the EDSA, the event that happened on 22nd February 1986 would have happened December 31st of 1985, because that was our timetable.
Sa inyo, tsaka yung
we never expected any people power. We assumed that pure military action. It just so happened that the political condition of the country was so fired already at that point that people started to come around when we were already in Camp Aguinaldo.
And EDSA is the, kumbaga, yung convergence point ng lahat ng tao coming from
because we were there.
Why?
That is why I was saying, kung hindi walang nagdesisyon na pupunta kami sa Aguinaldo, it could have happened in Plaza Miranda or in Luneta or in Liwasan Bonifacio, which are the traditional places where event like that would happen, no?
Pero, when was the time na pumasok si Cory na
Cory was never with us. At 2, I think about 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Saturday that year, I was interviewed by Father Efren Datu of Radio Veritas to ask me whether the information that they received was that I was in Aguinaldo and that I'm going to announce my withdrawal of support for President Marcos. And so I said yes. And that is the first broadcast
They announced it.
that was announced about the event. And that was what Cory heard in Cebu. And the reason why Efren Datu called me was because I think my former law partner, si Rene Cayetano, because I left a sealed letter to him for my wife
Last week.
to deliver if something happened to me, called Cardinal Sin about and informed him about it, about what I was going to do. And that is why Cardinal Sin went into hiding for a while that day and asked Father Efren Datu to contact me to find out whether it was true that I was going to withdraw my support. At that point, I was in the process of calling Bosworth, Ambassador Somiya of Japan to inform them about the event, and then also I also called Paeng Salas in New York in the middle of the night to tell him that, to inform UN that we are going to do this.
How about General Ramos, sir? General Ramos was not part of RAM, right?
No, I called General Ramos that Saturday before I left the house. After my meeting with Greg and Red Kapunan in my den. It was Ambassador Noe Wong, who was my aide on duty on that day, who suggested to me to call General Ramos and find out if he would join us. So I called him, and when I first heard his voice over his telephone line, he asked permission. He answered me when I called him and said, Mr. Secretary said, Sir, let me go to another room because I have some visitors here. And it turned out that he had members of Martha's Vineyard in his house in Alabang who were convincing him to also to withdraw his support for President Marcos. That's what this story I heard. And so when he went to the other side, I told him that I'm going to Aguinaldo with the members of the RAM, with Greg and the rest of them, to withdraw our support. And I said, if you care, you can join us. And for a while, he kept quiet, and then finally he said, yes, sir, I will join you. So that's why I waited for General Ramos in Aguinaldo until 6 o'clock when he arrived.
6 na. Gabi na dumating. With that, looking back, we have heard so much of from you about EDSA. Looking back, do you have any regret doing what you did?
I will not answer that question. That's past.
Okay.
But still, you haven't answered. When did Cory came in?
What I heard was that he returned to Manila on Monday afternoon. That is 23rd. No, 24th. 24th of February. But she never showed her face. He stayed in the house of her sister, Josephine. Josephine, I forgot the family name of Josephine Cojuangco. The husband used to be the president of Far Eastern University.
The De Los Reyes. Los Reyes?
I don't know. At Wakwak. She was living at Wakwak there. They were staying there.
So it's near.
That's where I saw Cory and my first and last time to see that house. When I saw Cory for the first time in the evening of about 6 o'clock in the evening of February 25, when Marcos already evacuated Malacanang.
So yung sir, yung
Nandun
council,
sila Maceda, sila Pimentel, all the people who became members of the cabinet of Cory later on. They were all, including Doña Aurora.
the mother.
That is where Cory learned for the first time that Marcos left Malacanang and was on his way supposed to Poway, but it turned out he finally went to Hawaii because I heard Cory talking to Bosworth after I told her about the departure of Marcos from Malacanang, that I do not want him here, take him out.
Okay. That's Cory. So yung sir, yung council na plinano nyo na nag-function ba yun?
No,
after,
hindi because
Cory assumed?
lahat ng dokumento na prepare namin at ang assistant ko na gumawa ng dokumento na yon ay si Yong Afable. If you remember Yong Afable who was my press officer. Sinira ko lahat on my way from my house to Camp Aguinaldo. All the pieces were scattered Anong EDSA?
Bakit nyo
I don't want to have any evidence.
evidence? Okay.
In a situation like that, you have to understand that it was a matter of life and death already for us.
But still, after that, yung hindi talaga nabuo yun. Yung,
Hindi na. Dahil the event rolled forward and nag-iba-iba na ang sitwasyon.
So walang negotiation between you and Cory regarding the
Nagkaroon kami ng negotiation. Hindi si Cory. Ang kausap ko si Jimmy Ungping.
Jimmy Ungping.
At ang emissary na pinadala ko doon kay Jimmy to meet him was si Louis Villafuerte at saka si Bono Adasa. No, may kasama sila doon sa grupo nila on the side of Consile. Doy Laurel. Silang nagdala kay Jimmy sa akin. Dahil at that point, we did not know that President Marcos was going to give up and leave Malacanang. We thought that the event will be protracted. So I thought that we cannot handle the military component of the event and the political component at the same time, and the financial support. So I said, I thought that perhaps the better thing is to form a temporary government to run the protracted event that was facing us. So I told Jimmy Ungping that we will form a provisional government composed of 5 cabinet members. 1 defense, which we will handle justice, foreign affairs, finance, and local government. To run and Cory will be the president with 5 cabinet positions and vice president si Laurel. Yun ang pinag-usapan namin ni Jimmy. Pumayag siya because Jimmy was the spokesman of the group. And so I thought that was it. But in the morning, my God, binuo na nila ang buong cabinet. Nung Tuesday already, nung mag-taking si Cory, they did not go through with our agreement. That was the start of the mistrust between us.
So pag upo pa lang niya, may mistrust dahil hindi nasunod yung napag-usapan.
By the way, before the proclamation of President Marcos as winner in the snap election, pinuntaan ako mismo ni Mon Mitra sa bahay ko doon sa Dasma. Isang gabi dumating siya. I think that was February 10 or February 9. Nung dumating siya at sinabi niya sa akin, pinasasabi ni Cory sa'yo na kung gusto mo, you take over the government and we will support you. Sabi ko sa kanya, I did not trust anybody at that time. Mon, kako. Dahil kaibigan ko si Ramon Mitre, kumpare ko yun. Sabi ko, Mon, kako, wala kaming planong ganyan eh. Wala akong plano. But anyway, kung may mangyari kako, I hope you will be here to support us politically. Ganun lang, usapan namin.
Wala pang plano na
Sila Cory, they were on their way to Mindanao. Because remember, Sunday before that week, if you remember, there was a big rally in Luneta. Di ba? Sunday. Nandun na mga foreign correspondents. And then in the afternoon of that Sunday, nagkaroon ng press conference si Presidente sa Marcos sa Malacanang. Nandun sila yung mga Newsweek, Time Magazine, nung pangalan nung mga reporter doon, sila mga ABS, kung ano-ano, mga foreign
That
media.
was after the snap elections.
Ha?
Tapos na yung
Oh,
snap election.
tapos na. Na-proclaim na si Presidente ba?
Proclaimed na.
Oo.
Okay.
O taking na lang. Nagkaroon ng press conference si Presidente Marcos, and Cory was serving a big rally in Luneta,
Right.
because they were already planning to go to Mindanao, to establish a revolutionary government. Oh. At that time, if I remember correctly, the key military officer in Mindanao was Pong Biason, si
Marines.
Rodolfo Biason,
So there
who was quite sympathetic to Cory.
So there was never a face-to-face meeting between you and former President Cory.
The first time that I met Cory, as I said, was in the evening of February 25th. To report to her my conversation with Bosworth, because before I went to her, it was about 5 o'clock, I think it was, when President Marcos called me, and he said, Johnny, he said, do you have any men around Malacanang? I said, no, sir. I said, we were never near Malacanang. Well, why do you ask? I said, well, because there are people who are firing at Malacanang. And then he said, can you send some of your men to stop this firing? And I said, my God, what happened to the Presidential Security Command? At that point, I started to wonder. And then I said, I will do that, Mr. President. I said, but then I will send Prospero Olivas, I said, with men to help you. And at that point, I mentioned to him casually that I just had the conversation with Bosworth. And he said, I told him that Bosworth told me that the American government will support us. And so he stopped for a while and he said, well, Johnny, can you call back Ambassador Bosworth and make, what's the name of that, the Jusmag general at that point in the Philippines, available to me to evacuate my family. It was at that point that I learned for the first time that President Marcos was leaving Malacanang. Because earlier in the day, that was a Tuesday, early in the morning, kausap ko si Marcos eh. Kaharap si Fidel Ramos. He was giving me the government. I will transfer the government to you. You do whatever you want, and I'll just stay aside. He said, then you run the government. I said, Mr. President, we have no such intention. We have already committed ourselves to Cory as her army. I did not know that he was going to leave. And then after that, and in fact, I said we are on our way to Club Filipino to attend his oath-taking. And then he said, can you ask her to postpone her oath-taking? I will try, Mr. President. I never talked to Cory about postponing. Then we went to the oath-taking of Cory. And then he asked me during that conversation if I go to Hawaii, will I be safe? I said, yes, Mr. President, we have the intention of harming you. If I leave the country, he said, can I come back? Of course, I said, you will be welcome. That then is And that was our conversation. Ramos is still alive. You can ask him. He was in front of me. In fact, they talked also. The cousins talked during that
So why do
morning.
you think, sir? Why do you think President Marcos
Then,
then was asking you to somewhat delay the proclamation of Cory?
I don't know. Because he wanted to be proclaimed first.
Ah,
Okay.
And in fact, nagkaroon kami rin ng problema because the young officers with me in the RAM wanted Cory to take her out of office in Camp Crame. Eh, nung kausap ko siya in the morning, kinausap ko rin si Cory. Dahil iniba niya yung venue. Sinabihan kami na sa Club Filipino, ma'am, he said, the boys would like you to
Marami.
take you out of office in Camp Crame. It's safer because nobody knew that Marcos will get out at that point. So, he was very entrenched in Malacanang. And no, he said, I want to take my office in Club Filipino. I did not know yet that he filled up all the cabinet position. That's why we went there. Had I known, maybe the history of the country would have been different. No?
how different? If you have known, how different if you have...
Babaya mo na lang. Speculation na lang.
So, moving on, sir, on other issues, we have talked so much about EDSA. On this current burning issues about coronavirus DC 2019, what do you say to this? Nag-aaral kayo ng continuously about this?
There are so many theories now. No?
Mm.
I at this point, I will assume that it is coronavirus.
Mm.
But there is an article that I read yesterday, written by supposedly a participant of an experiment in China about bacteriological warfare that caused this. I would suggest that the government and all of you who are interested will read that article. It is in Facebook. Very detailed, but it has certain flaws. But by and large, it looks like it is credible, no?
warfare.
That this coronavirus is just a concocted name to divert attention to the reality of what really happened.
So, do you think it was an experiment that can?
Well, that is the story. I cannot vouch for it, but that is the story, that there was a chemical agent or whatever that was the
Developed.
result of an experiment in an area in Xinjiang involving the Uyghurs who are as guinea pigs, who are in the re-education camps in that province of China. That was conducted and it was successful. And well, it talks about the interests of the CIA and so on. But you read it and you make your own conclusion. It's a very interesting story.
At this age of
It has a
technology
connection.
and,
This experiment has a connection with, not against America, but in connection with the demonstration going on in Hong Kong.
So that's possible.
It's possible. I would say that without those two points that give me a certain amount of doubt, I would believe it.
But now it's spread all over the world. So
The danger is,
there.
according to this story, the lethality of the infection, if you are infected by that chemical agent, is 100%. No survivors. It's intended for warfare.
So at this is it, do you believe that that is yung kumbaga
It's
yung mga
not my
ganyang
belief.
experiment?
I'm telling you to read it, to make your own conclusion. I will give credence to it. I will not take it for granted.
Okay.
It's better to study these things instead of giving doubt about it immediately, because who knows? With the advance of AI, artificial intelligence in our world today, I will believe that.
So that could account for there's no antidote yet.
The only antidote, according to that article, is a mask that they have developed for it in order to protect those that must be protected, and mostly the people, members of the Communist Party of China, and their high officials, and they could not mass produce that mask. That is the only antidote.
It's scary, huh? Scary. So
Yeah,
another
it is scary.
another issue, sir, this abrogation of the visiting forces agreement with the United States.
Well, I think the president, some will disagree with this, but my only concern, I would say that the president of the country was correct in that decision, except that it was not well studied, because that is contained in the agreement between the United States government and the Philippine government. You can terminate the agreement, but either side can terminate the agreement by a notice, which become effective 180 days after, I think, if I remember correctly. Now, the reality of this relationship is that America will never go to war for us. We are not that important enough. Although we are a part of the first island chain of defense of the United States that runs from Honshu, Japan, Okinawa, Taiwan, Philippines, and Indonesia. But we are not that important. We are in the center of it, but the most important part of this chain is the northern side beyond the Philippines and the southern side beyond the Philippines, Indonesia,
Taiwan.
Japan, and Taiwan. Oh.
So yung effect,
Ngayon,
there's very little effect.
Ngayon, with this withdrawal of the Philippines, we have no security cover. So we have to depend on China. But there is Japan to consider. While Japan is our friend, they have their own national interest. And we are important in the consideration of the national interest of Japan. And that is also true in the case of Taiwan. So we have no navy that can match the naval capability of Japan. Because Japan, if you do not know it, is the second biggest navy on the planet today. The biggest is
United States.
U.S. Second most potent navy in the world on the planet today is Japan.
Why would Japan have an interest on the Philippines?
Because they are antagonist of China, and they want
If we're close with China, you mean?
as far as China is concerned, the Philippines is like a fence, and all the way to Japan, there are only three possible routes where China can access the Pacific. Two of these routes are in the Philippines. The first route is from the East China Sea down to the South Korea, the peninsula, the Korean peninsula. You go north all the way to Hokkaido and pass through the Strait of La Perouse Strait. That is one. The second is from Hainan Naval Base through the Balintang Channel, which is between Batanes and Babuyan Island. That is the next exit, but that is well guarded by the American submarines. Then the third exit is downward to the fortification and veer left between Balabac and Sabah through the Sulusi to Cebu to all the way to Celebes and Oceania. Oh, that. And then the fourth is, of course, you go all the way to the Indian Ocean beyond Indonesia.
That is too long.
But these are, that is why the Philippines, as far as Japan's military interest is concerned, is very important because the defense will continue. Otherwise,
This is the reason why we were occupied during World War II.
yeah, no, apart from the fact that that was an imperialistic objective, the Southeast Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere.
Last one for me, sir, and the issue of ABS-CBN, yung franchise ng ABS-CBN, what do you have to say to this, sir? Tama ba na ang sinasabi nila is an issue of press freedom?
It is a violation of the Constitution. Under the Constitution, all media outlets must be fully owned by Filipinos. You cannot own a single share in a media
If you are a foreigner.
if you are a foreigner. And a corporation that allows a foreign interest, foreign ownership in a media corporation would be violating that prohibition. Ngayon, kung yung sinasabi nila na yung ano ba yun? Philippine Depository Receipts, PDR, ay pwede because it has no voting rights. Eh bakit nila hindi ginawa na preferred shares? Anong kaiba nun sa preferred shares ng korporasyon?
That's right. Yeah.
No voting rights din yun, pero it is a badge of ownership. And besides, looking at it from ABS-CBN as a corporation, they do not pay interest on these PDRs. The PDRs share in the outcome of the economic operation of the business of ABS-CBN. By the way, kung mananalo ang gobyerno doon sa kaso nila sa Supreme Court, all media outlets with the same PDRs are disqualified to continue operating their business. That's how lethal that case is. Yeah.
Even GMA 7.
Yeah.
All who have the PDRs.
That's only a test case.
Okay.
A decision by the Supreme Court will become the law of the law of the case.
Then it would be a case
Precedent. Huh?
It would be a case of suppression of press freedom then.
Why?
If all media
The press freedom is provided in the Constitution. The prohibition to own a share, foreign share in a media outlet is also a constitutional provision. Oh, that's a limitation to press freedom. Yeah. And besides, they can shout, use, but you cannot use the franchise.
Okay, with that, nice talking to you, sir. Naubusan na naman tayo ng oras. And
Salamat.
thank you for gracing
I have
us.
to go home.
Thank you, sir.